Welcome back to Balance and Bubbles. I'm Shannon.
And hi, everybody. I'm Amy.
And before we dive in today's conversation, we always like to invite you to slow down with us for just a minute. So if you are able to go ahead and grab something to sip on, because every week we pair our conversation with a simple mocktail you can enjoy along the way. This week, we're going to be sipping on this delicious pomegranate sparkle. It's simple and it's refreshing, and it feels like the perfect companion for a conversation about the heart. So if you happen to have rose water on hand, you can add a drop or two, completely optional, but the roses have long been associated, I don't know why I can't say that word, associated with the heart in many traditions.
But if you're like me and you don't happen to have rose water sitting around in your kitchen, don't worry about it. The drink is absolutely delicious without it. We're all about simple around here. I actually just added in a little bit of glitter to make it more fun.
Yeah, and I added in the pomegranate seeds, so it gives it a little bit of tart, but it's really, really good. So there's something that's really beautiful about the symbolism of the rose. Roses have been connected with love, compassion, tenderness, and healing, and even grief for centuries. And honestly, I think even imagining the scent of a rose creates just a little softening.
Oh, definitely. It's funny because nobody smells a rose and immediately feels rushed. It's almost like when you smell a rose, you just take that time to just decompress. I love smelling roses.
Exactly, Amy. And if you are someone who enjoys essential oils, you might diffuse rose oil while you're listening today. I have rose oil diffusing in my diffuser. And there's just something about that scent that just naturally invites that deeper breath and more presence, which feels really fitting for today's conversation.
But before we dive in, if you haven't joined our Balance and Bubbles community yet, this is a great time to do that. You'll find this week's mocktail recipe, our monthly shopping list, reflection questions, downloadable resources, event information, and all of our companion materials at www.balanceandbubblespodcast.com. If you're driving or folding laundry, maybe you're out for a walk, don't worry about stopping right now. Just enjoy listening. But if you have a moment later to hit pause, head over to the website and join us. We would love to have you as part of our community.
Absolutely. So if you pause, we will be right here when you get back. So today we're stepping into week 3 of our Coming Back to Center series. In week 1, we talked about listening to the body before it yells at us and forces us to listen. In week 2, we explored the mental load that so many women are carrying. And now we're moving into the heart space, more specifically, emotional alignment. And we're asking a question that sounds simple, but it isn't always easy to answer. What am I actually feeling?
I think this is where a lot of women are going to recognize themselves immediately because it's not that we don't have emotions, it's that we've gotten really good at moving right past them. We're busy, people need us, life keeps happening. And most of us have learned a long time ago that being functional was way more important than being emotionally present.
Yeah. And Amy, there's a reason for that. Many of us have spent decades being caregivers, being partners, mothers, employees, or maybe employers, being leaders and volunteers, the person that everyone has really depended on. So we learned how to keep moving. We learned that just keep moving forward. But emotions don't disappear simply because we don't stop to acknowledge them. They tend to wait patiently until we're willing to listen.
Or until they start to get our attention in another way, which I'm sure has happened to many of us. Maybe you're more irritable than usual. Maybe your patience feels shorter. Maybe you're exhausted but can't explain why. Or maybe something just feels heavier than it should.
Absolutely. So I'm going to let you in on a little secret. In my pomegranate sparkle today, because I had a pretty intense morning, I put a little of the U Relax, which has the ashwagandha in it, just so I can be a little more relaxed. So,
Love that.
yeah. And sometimes this shows up as numbness, not necessarily sadness, just a disconnection from ourselves, and you're doing all the things you're supposed to be doing, but you're not really feeling connected to your own experience. When it becomes your normal, you stop questioning it.
Right? You think it's just life, you think it's adulthood, you think that's just getting older, but sometimes it's not age at all. Sometimes it's accumulated emotional weight.
Yeah. So that really brings us back to that question. What am I actually feeling? Not what makes sense, not what should you feel, not what everyone else would understand, just connecting to what's true.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the places emotional misalignment often shows up is as resentment. And resentment can get a really bad reputation. But when we look at it through a different lens, we can see it as information. And it's usually telling us that something has been out of alignment for a while.
And I'm glad you say that because it's rarely one big thing. It's usually several things that over time, right? So, lots of little things that accumulate, saying yes when you wanted to say no, doing things because it's easier than having a conversation, continuing a pattern that it's always just been done that way. Then one day you're standing there in your kitchen thinking, why am I so irritated?
That was my morning today. Exactly. And often what resentment is pointing towards is a boundary that either wasn't set or has not been honored. Not because anyone is bad and, not because we've done anything wrong, but just because something needs attention.
And I definitely think that's where people get nervous about emotions because they hear, pay attention to your feelings and assume we're saying, let every emotion take over your life. And that's not really what we're talking about.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. Emotions are information. And I think, that's true. People kind of get afraid, like if those emotions get too big and they're going to be like, I don't want this to overwhelm me. So it'll be kept in in a container. Right. But if we can think about them as being information, they're not instructions. We don't have to do what our emotion is kind of maybe pushing us to do. Just because I feel angry doesn't mean that I need to react from that anger. Or just because I feel hurt doesn't mean that I have to make a big decision in that moment from that hurt space. The emotion is simply providing information about what is happening inside of me.
Shannon, I love that distinction because I know for me, I've really had to grow in that area because the options aren't just to suppress it or explode, which in the past I could be known as maybe exploding a little bit, but there is actually a middle ground.
And when we think about that middle ground being curiosity, instead of asking, how do I make this feeling go away? Right? How do I not feel it? I don't want to feel this feeling. So, how do I make it go away? We can ask, what is this feeling really trying to tell me? And this is where that awareness begins. And awareness is very different from overwhelm. And I think that this is a really good place to pause for a moment because whenever we start talking about emotions, some people immediately wonder, what if this feels overwhelming? And that's a really fair question because I think we can all relate to that feeling of that emotion just being way too much for us to handle or behave appropriately inside it. So, one of the practices that I love is something called heart focused breathing. And is it okay, Amy, if I just share this just
Abs
real quick?
I'm so excited. Yeah, I wanna do it with you.
Okay, great. Awesome. So, heart focused breathing, if you're in a place that feels comfortable, just go ahead and place your hand over your heart. And if you feel safe or you can do it, you can go ahead and close your eyes. You don't have to, it's not important to. And just take in a slow breath in through your nose. And as you exhale, just imagine that that breath is moving out through your heart space. So, breathing into your hand on your chest. And let that exhale be about twice as long as your inhale. So if you inhale, let's do it again. If you inhale for the count of 4, so inhale through your nose, 2, 3, 4, and then exhale a little bit slower through your hand, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Great. And you can take a few minutes and when you do this and continue breathing this way for, I don't know, around a 5, 6, 10 breaths like that, it can really help you feel more centered around that. And then you can figure out what that emotion is telling you.
I love that. Well, because it's so simple, I wish we would have done this before we started our podcast today. We both had a pretty rough morning, right? So, we probably should have done that right before we started, but I love that you can do this sitting in your car, standing in your kitchen, waiting in line somewhere. You can even do it in your office when no one is watching you. No one even has to know that you're doing it, but one thing Shannon and I immediately noticed was that deep breath it was calming. It was very calming.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll share with you just really quick. So I taught that breathing technique to my son when he became a sheriff deputy, and I have taught it in my law enforcement resilience courses. And my son used it every time he got into a high stress situation like driving in a pursuit and things like that. And he was like they some of the dispatchers would be like, "Wow, you sounded so calm on the radio." And he said it was totally heart focused breathing and he could do it while he was still doing everything else, driving,
Sure.
handling, right, all of that stuff. So it's tremendous. You can use it anywhere. So, you know, I love that you said you noticed, right, that kind of relaxation that comes over. You might notice that your shoulders start to soften, your jaw starts to relax, and you can just feel kind of your body settle. And if you go, I can add a little bit more to that, but if you go a little bit deeper and right now think of someone or something that you genuinely love and appreciate. This could be a child, a grandchild, a partner, a friend, a pet. Could be a favorite place. And when you think of that person or that thing, just allow yourself to feel a feeling of appreciation. Inhale that appreciation and move it back through your heart. And what that really does is helps that emotion of appreciation really helps to shift our nervous system from a high intensity fight, flight, tension, sympathetic system to the parasympathetic, where it helps to calm and let us move from that parasympathetic nervous system.
And it's not like you're forcing positivity here. We're just giving ourselves something steady to connect to.
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually, a science behind it. Heart Math Institute is who came up with the heart focused breathing. There's all kinds of breathing out there that actually works, but they came up with this and they discovered that when we do that breath work, just like I said, we can move out of that fight flight where our thoughts are really sped up, our body is becoming more reactive. But when we do slow our breathing and we lengthen that exhale, we're really helping our nervous system to shift and we can get into that rest and digest where we can have some recovery. And that's that part that can feel calmer and safer and more regulated for us.
And Shannon, I want to ask you a quick question if you don't mind. So I know that sometimes when people get overwhelmed, they just shut down. Like when I was teaching, or even I've almost had it happen to myself that you get so overwhelmed possibly with what you have things going on that you don't even know where to start. And I could
Hmm.
see how this could be like just first of all, let's just breathe,
Hmm.
find a way to just, figure out a starting point. So what would you kind of tell people because I really think a lot of people when they get overwhelmed, they almost just shut down.
Yeah. So we go back to awareness, right? So first we have to start to recognize what is my body starting to tell me, right? Am I carrying tension all of a sudden? Am I, is my shoulders tight? Am I feeling that tension in the back of my head? A lot of women, and I don't think they realize this, carry a lot of tension in their hips and legs. Will right
Interesting.
will tense up. So when we become aware, that's the first step, and we can use this breath to start to release that tension, right? We can, and so when we have that overwhelm of like, the brain freezes because the brain is like, I'm so overwhelmed right now. I don't know what to do with this. I don't even know my first move. And it gives you just that little bit of space. Like I said, when you shift from that sympathetic nervous system of fight flight to that
Mhm.
parasympathetic nervous system, you can calm the brain down enough that you can actually re-engage that prefrontal cortex, which is what
Right.
we want going. Yeah.
It
So go
yeah,
ahead.
and I mean, we're not trying to get rid of the emotion, right? I mean, because when you feel there's a reason that you're feeling overwhelmed, and chances are you need to, like you say, be aware and then go into figuring out what you can do, but we're really just helping our body feel safe enough to stay present with it, and so I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the tricks that I started learning when I was learning about all this stuff. When we understand the brain and we think about the amygdala, the amygdala is these two little almond shaped things in our head. And it's part of one of the more earlier development of the brain, right? And so if you think about the amygdala being this little thing right here, when we fold our fingers over, this is our prefrontal cortex, right? This is the front part of our brain that we operate from all day long. Our executive functioning, decision making. I think
Mhm.
I talked about it a little bit in the last episode, but this is where this goes. But when we have a huge emotion that hits us, it lands here. It lands in the amygdala, and I always kinda say it's kinda like you blow your top, right? It's like
Right.
that prefrontal cortex goes offline, so think about any time that have you ever responded to an emotion from a place that you're standing next looking at your behavior going, "Oh my gosh, where did that come from?" And it's because that amygdala took over, and it's gonna take over, all the time, and that when that prefrontal cortex goes offline, it's the amygdala running the show now, right? It's the one that's angry and irritated or crying or whatever the response might be. So we want to get that prefrontal cortex back over that amygdala. So I always imagine when you ask yourself, what am I feeling? You have to engage your prefrontal cortex and it comes
Mhm.
back online, tells the little amygdala, I got you. You're covered. We're going to get through this. And it gives you that space, right? So I always use this as an anchor, like, I got you. I got you. It's kind of, I'm feeling this right now.
Yeah.
And I got you. Really, really easy way to do that. So, yeah, so we're not trying to get rid of our emotion, think about that. We just need to understand it and we need to kind of give our body a safe place in our brain to go. And really, honestly, you don't have to take our word for it. Try this. Next time that little amygdala gets, going, try it and just notice what happens when you take that moment to take that deep breath. And you can even start to make that heart focused breathing a daily ritual for yourself. Take a few moments in the morning, take a few moments on your lunch break and practice a few minutes of that heart focused breathing. One of the things that I've loved about this series so far is that we're really connecting all these pieces together. We started with the body, then we talked about the mind, and now we're talking about the emotions. And what keeps showing up is that these aren't separate conversations. They are different ways that our inner wisdom can communicate with us. And when I say inner wisdom, I'm talking about our innate knowledge, right, of what we have about ourselves and our bodies. This is why one of the reasons that the brain and research about the brain and heart math fascinates me because they talk about something that's called the heart brain coherence and the idea that our heart and our brain are constantly communicating with each other.
And that makes total sense, and it really makes me think. What I love about doing this podcast with you is I was actually telling my daughter the other day, I'm like, I have gotten something out of every single episode we've done. And obviously, we're doing it because we want to build this community. We want to help women. A lot of us are going through the same thing, but it just makes sense because I know for me, emotional regulation for someone who is a type A personality
Mhm.
that we feel very deeply and we are very passionate, sometimes your amygdala, I think, can go into overdrive, which anybody that's been around me and knows me really well, like, so that's not always a positive thing. So I love that just where you're connecting all of this.
Mhm.
And it's just I think it's really important that, we've all had moments where our mind says one thing, but something deeper inside says, "I don't know about that."
Mhm. Yes, exactly. And I'm gonna throw a caveat in here because it's not even just the high stress type A. Think about the hormones that we have cruising through our body that affects our emotions too, right? Sometimes we feel a certain way and we have no clue why we feel that way. And it can just be that emotional influence that's happening. So, one of the things that's really interesting is what HearthMath found is that when we're caught in that stress, frustration, or that overwhelm, the communication between the heart and the brain becomes less coherent. But practices like heart focused breathing can help create greater coherence between the heart and the brain, helping us think a little more clearly, feel more balanced, and respond more intentionally. And gives us that space, like I said. And I want to, just share. So think about this. So our brain has an energy field of about 2 inches. So if you were to measure the energy field, it would come out about 2 inches from our head. Our heart has been able to be measured up to 3 feet so far. They think maybe even further than that, but
Wow.
it's 3
Wow.
feet. So, think
Yeah.
about if you and I, when we were sitting together, on our last couple of episodes, we were in each other's heart coherence, right? We were in each other's heart field, and so that's why we can walk into a room and connect with someone, and we already know the temperature in the room, right? Because our heart picks up on it first, actually, before our brain even does. So and then the heart's talking, right? The heart's talking to the brain back and forth. So, it's a fascinating understanding.
Absolutely. So we're not choosing necessarily between logic and emotion, we're letting them work together. I love that. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. So because emotional alignment isn't about turning off your mind, it's really about creating enough space for your heart and your mind to be in the same conversation.
I think emotional honesty sounds scarier than it actually is.
Mhm.
People imagine some giant emotional release, but most of the time it is much quieter. I think for myself that a lot of times inside your brain, you already know, right? Like you know things that are going on, and I definitely think that what you're saying is just fascinating because for a lot of us, I think it's more that we really are trying to figure out how to manage
Mm.
what it's saying and all of these feelings. And then also what do you do with these emotions? So I love all of this uh the actual brain part that you're
Mhm.
bringing to the conversation.
Absolutely. So, it's noticing and being aware that when what you're saying doesn't match what you're feeling. So I think what you're kind of talking about here is a little bit of when we say I'm fine and I'm not. You're I'm fine and I'm not, or I'm saying it's okay when it isn't. And it's really that overriding yourself over and over again. When we constantly deny those emotions, um, that's when they begin to get pent up and that resentment comes in.
And I think all those add up. And eventually they create that feeling of just being completely disconnected from yourself.
Absolutely. Yes. So which is why our emotions matter so much, not because they're inconvenient, but because they're informative. They're trying to tell us something and they're trying to help us understand what's happening, what's going on beneath the surface. So, as we wrap up here, here's a simple check in that you can use this week. Ask yourself, what am I feeling? And you know what? I'm going to say before you do that, take a minute to do the heart focused breathing, right? Take a minute to get that prefrontal cortex back online and
Mm.
ask yourself, what am I feeling? Where do I feel it in my body? Does that seem like a weird question to you, Amy? Where do I feel
No,
it in my
not
body?
not at all, because I can tell you when I just did the breathing, I know I felt it probably from my neck down. Exactly what you said, like, it was like I just relaxed,
Yeah.
just relaxed.
Yeah. So, our body always informs us. So it's so important. Where am I feeling this in my body? Am I feeling it in my stomach? Am I feeling it in my shoulders? Am I feeling it in my head, as pressure? So, where do I feel it in my body? And what might this feeling be trying to tell me?
And then remember, you don't have to solve anything immediately. We keep talking about that. And that's another thing that I'm really enjoying about what we are talking about is a lot of what we keep trying, I guess, communicate is that these first few things are just paying attention. Like
Mhm.
that's where all of this alignment will begin. So, before we go, we'd love to continue this journey with you. You will find this week's mocktail recipe. Remember, it's so cute and it is delicious.
Delicious.
Reflection questions, the downloadable resources, our event information, and all of our companion materials at www.balanceandbubblespodcast.com. And just enter your email and we'll send everything straight to your inbox so you can follow along with us throughout the month.
So, thank you for spending your time with us today.
And we never take it for granted that you choose to spend whether it's 5 minutes with us or the entire a full podcast. So,
And until next time,
come as you are,
reset
reset
often.
often,
Awesome. We'll see you next time on Balance and Bubbles.
and take good care of yourself. Have a wonderful week.